Well, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm really excited to be here. Yes, I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I just want to start off by asking who in here has heard of the National Wildlife Refuge System? If you could raise your hand. You are an informed crowd. For the record, we seem to be a little known agency, but we are a federal agency, and so the National Wildlife Refuge System, it was established by Teddy Roosevelt, as I'm sure most of you know, and it is a national network of lands and waters whose mandate per Congress is to manage these lands for the benefit of wildlife. A sister agency is the National Park Service. Their congressional mandate is to manage for people. Ours is to manage for wildlife. And so this was the vision of Teddy Roosevelt. He wanted to make sure that there were always going to be these wild places, these large landscapes where people could go to hunt and fish and enjoy wildlife. He didn't want only the rich to have access to these large tracts of land. He wanted to make sure everybody would be able to. And so, as I'm sure many of you know, what happened was that there was a little island off the coast of Florida called Pelican Island. It's about 3 acres. There were some birds on there. It was a rookery, and people were coming onto the rookery and taking the birds, and it really offended his hunter ethic, his conservationist ethic. He was so offended that people were doing this and just taking these birds in completely unfair fashion, and he was contacted by a gentleman by the name of Paul Craigle. And Paul Craigle was a local, and he loved those birds. It's a little island called Pelican Island, and he would patrol that island just on his own. He cared so much, and he would patrol the island to make sure that people weren't going onto it and harvesting the birds. And the reason Teddy Roosevelt was so offended is because they were taking the birds to make ladies' hats. And I don't know if you've seen pictures from that era, but they have these really weird, women with like a dead bird on their shoulder or on their head. It was really bizarre. And so that really offended him. And so through Florida Audubon, Paul Craigle essentially reached President Roosevelt and said, this is not fair. This is not what ethical people do. And so President Roosevelt established Pelican Island as the first, it's the first federally owned property that was managed for the benefit of wildlife. And he went on to establish 53 throughout his presidency. And these are federal lands that are set aside for the benefit of wildlife. And so it's his legacy. And here he is on Merritt Island. And it's his legacy. And today, the National Wildlife Refuge System, we've gone through several iterations, different names, different agencies. But today, we have 560 National Wildlife Refuges. They are in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, Guam, and elsewhere. And as you can see, there's a pattern. So you'll see there's sort of some consistency here. So when the National Wildlife Refuge System first started, we were really for the ducks. It was really, the National Wildlife Refuge System was really established mostly for birds and migratory birds. So a lot of these lands that were purchased by the federal government fell into that migratory flyway. But the National Wildlife Refuge System has evolved. We are now setting aside federal lands. We're using federal funds to purchase lands to protect habitats, to protect landscapes, to protect endangered species. And so that's why you see a lot of these, that's why you can see sort of a consistent pattern, but then you see sort of this random spot. But there's one in each state, and at least one within an hour of most major cities. And so here in Texas, we have 20 National Wildlife Refuges. And in the Houston area, we actually have 9, but technically really 5. 5 of those are open to the public. The other 4 tend to be conservation easements. Those are folks who wanted to protect their land and worked with the National Wildlife Refuge System to have those lands fall under the protective banner, but they're not necessarily open to the public. But so these are the different refuges. So there's Trinity River, and that protects bottomland hardwoods. You've got Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge right here. It's a migratory waterfowl refuge. You have McFadden, which is the same. You can't see it, but there's Texas Point right here. And then this is Brazoria National Wildlife Refuge. I believe these tracks fall under San Bernard. San Bernard is those Columbia bottomland hardwoods established to protect those. And then you have Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge over here, which that is the classic example of an endangered species refuge. The only thing those folks do is try to make sure that that bird does not go extinct. That's their only purpose. That's all they do. If you go out to Atwater Prairie Chicken Refuge, they don't have the fancy interpretation. They don't have the park ranger sitting there waiting for you gleefully to take you on a walk. They really are focused on protecting that bird and protecting that prairie for the benefit of that bird. So I'm going to go a little bit off topic here. So I just kind of want to give you a reference point. You can see all of these national, basically within about a 1 hour drive from Houston at any point is a National Wildlife Refuge. And yet only half the people in this room know about the National Wildlife Refuge System. So you have all of these federal lands that are available to you that are right here on your back door, and nobody knows about us. And we are open 7 days a week, sunrise to sunset, free of charge. You can go out, you can see alligators, you can see birds, you can see incredible prairie habitats. For the plant folks, a lot of opportunities to see some really amazing landscapes with native species. So here we are right around Houston, which is what takes me to this next slide. So I'm going to go a little bit off topic. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Wildlife Refuge System, about every 15 years we get together and we do some serious reflecting. We take a look at ourselves and we ask the hard questions. We get together as an agency, all divisions come together and we regroup and we ask ourselves, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Because within a 10 or 15 year time frame, things can change. You think about the internet, you think about the BP oil spill, you think about some of these sort of larger things that have happened in the world that change the conservation landscape. So we get together as an agency, and we did this most recently in 2010. And we took a long, hard look. And we put it out to our partners. We put it out to everybody. We give everybody an opportunity. And you can say good things about us, you can say bad things about us. Internally, we say enough bad things about ourselves, I can assure you that. But so we take in all these comments, and I think in this last round, we had 400,000 different comments. So we take all that information and we synthesize it, and we pull from that recommendations for ourselves. And so this last time we did this process, we came up with 24 recommendations for the National Wildlife Refuge System. And they range from everything from how we are addressing climate change to how we are engaging visitors on national wildlife refuges. So one of those 24 recommendations was, nobody knows about us. And we are out here in the middle of nowhere, and we're so busy. I mean, we are an agency of biologists. We don't want to talk to you folks. We want to look at the bugs. We want to count the plants. We want to deal with the landscape. We are not interested in people. But that does not help us. And the agency has come to that realization and is working hard to engage people. But we were not being successful. We have not been being successful for the last 20 years. And so one of the recommendations was, you need to go where people are. People aren't coming to you, you need to go to people. And you need to go to people who are not the birders. You don't need to reach out to the Native Plant Society folks. They already love you, even if they don't know who you are. You need to reach out to the folks that quite frankly don't like you, or the people who are suspicious of you, the people who think federal lands shouldn't exist, the people who could care less about an Atwater Prairie Chicken. And so we came up with this recommendation to move into the urban space. And we're doing that in two ways. There are national wildlife refuges within urban spaces. For instance, John Hines in Philadelphia, a beautiful little refuge just right smack dab there in Philadelphia. There's Valle de Oro in Albuquerque. So those are examples of instances where there is a piece of land and we can bring people and engage them. But the other half of that recommendation was, you need to go to places where there is no land base. And so we created what we are calling partnerships, urban partnerships. and it's under the Urban Wildlife Conservation Program. And so it's that two prongs. One is urban refuges and one is urban partnerships. So the urban partnerships is where the program that I work for comes in. Sorry, apparently I'm not supposed to do this, the microphone. But anyway, so urban partnerships are where we have a Fish and Wildlife Service staff person, and it's their job to engage people in conservation through partnerships. So I'm overseeing the Houston Urban Conservation Program, Urban Partnership and Engagement Program, and it is my job to work with the community to find opportunities to engage people in conservation. And I don't have a budget, and Fish and Wildlife Service does that by design. They're like, no, you can't have any money, we will pay your salary, because you have to figure this out through partnerships. Because otherwise the Fish and Wildlife Service just comes in and says, oh, we got money, we'll figure that out. No. The point is to engage the community. The point is to do conservation that reflects the culture and the needs of that community, not what the Fish and Wildlife Service deems important. Because if you ask us, we're always going to say Atwater Prairie Chickens. Always. In this part of the world, anyway. So here I am today, and I work for the Urban Wildlife Conservation Program, and Houston has an urban partnership. And so I'm here to talk to you today about one of the programs that we're implementing. And again, we are very much targeting non-traditional audiences, new audiences. And this program, it's a partnership program. I think Jaime Gonzalez was actually supposed to deliver this program today, and rightfully so, because it was his idea. So what happened is when the Fish and Wildlife Service came to Houston, everything's Jaime's idea, right? Yeah, like we all know that. So, and he has good ones. So when we came to Houston, one of the first things we did is we went around and we found one or two partners, people that we thought were obvious, like Houston Parks and Rec. Of course we're going to go to Houston Parks and Rec. So we go to them and we said, what do you need from how can we incorporate conservation into what you do? And they were like, oh, well, we could do after school, we could do summer programming, we could do this, we could do that. Okay, great. Notes. Who would you recommend we talk to? And so we just got this list of all these different organizations and all these potential partners, and we just went out and we talked to everybody. And of course, we landed on Jaime Gonzalez and the Katy Prairie Conservancy. And we asked Jaime, we said, what do if in a perfect world, if you had the resources, what would you do? And he said, well, here we are in Houston, sorry. He said that he would do virtual field trips for kids who had cancer and were undergoing treatment at UTMD Anderson. He said, I just don't have the resources to do that. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service said, well, let us help you. And so his vision was to, and I think I have my perspective right here, but I think this, well, essentially the kids from UTMD Anderson looked down on this prairie. And so he wanted to stand in that prairie and engage those kids up in their hospital room, because they have a magnet school, or I'm sorry, a charter school in the hospital. And so he wanted to engage those kids. So we said, okay, we'll help you do that, because everyone knows nature has healing properties. However that might look for you. Sure, maybe you want to go hike Denali, or maybe you just want to look at it outside your window, but it has a healing quality. It makes people feel better. And so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is very interested in that. We're very interested in using this product that we have in spades and helping people use it for healing properties. So this was very consistent with the conservation message that we wanted to pursue. And so we said yes. So we hired an SCA intern. And here are the original partners, and this is kind of changing on us, but we got together and we named it Virtually Wild Texas, and we started off just doing it for UTMD Anderson. We literally just worked with the educator in the hospital, and here is Caitlin, our first SCA intern, and that hot mess of equipment, we didn't know technology, we didn't know what we were doing. We had a video camera attached to a laptop. We were maniacs out there, but we went out onto the Katy Prairie, and we arranged to talk about the importance of prairie, and we engaged those kids, and we had a young man out there who had his horse, and he did a roping display to talk about the importance of grazing. And so this was our first attempt. The technology has evolved. We've gotten better, but I gotta say, Jaime and I still look at that and giggle. And this young woman, she does not weigh 80 pounds soaking wet, and she just had all this equipment. She was a really good sport. So, it has adapted. The program has evolved and adapted, and we go to different locations, and we engage different conservation professionals.
This is a baby alligator. Actually, it's a couple of years old. It's a little small for its age. They're about 6 inches when they're hatched. And in most areas, they grow a foot a year if there's 5 years. But for some reason, just along the coast where we are, they grow about 6 inches, 6 to 9 inches.
Okay.
A&M's supposed to be doing a study to find out why. We don't know. Look at
You can see how, first of all, you can see how the technology changed. We now have an iPhone, and this is really simple. We have an iPhone, we loaded down the free Zoom app, and we now work with Region 4 Education Service Center, and they pipe this out to, we've had as many as 29 classrooms from all across the state of Texas. Yeah, at one time. Like the kids in Lubbock were freaking out about this alligator. It was great. And what's really wonderful about this program, so Jaime and Miss Ruby are standing in front of the camera, and first of all, what you may have seen are there just bees going everywhere, and they were so professional. They were, and these bees were swarming everywhere, and man, they didn't miss a beat. They just kept going. But what else you can't see is that right back here, me and the latest intern were standing back there with our video equipment, and we had just started. We were not 15 seconds into the program, and this huge male alligator comes up out of the water and just bellows. And we're standing behind the camera, you know, looking at them, and we're all like, and Jaime and Miss Ruby are like, so anyway, the alligator. But it was really wonderful, and I was so sorry that we didn't have the camera on that the kids couldn't see that and hear that alligator, because it was nature happening right then and there. And so so this is Brazoria National Wildlife Refuge, one of the places that we go to, and they've got some excellent programming. They consistently deliver. They got a great little eastern hognose snake that the kids love, and so they just hold those critters right up to the camera and the kids can see them. Oh, I've got that control. Okay, and this is the Texas Wildlife Rehab Center. So this is a flying squirrel, and part of what we try to do with our programming is we don't try to just make it Atwater Prairie Chickens. We try to mix it up, and we try to show all of the different ways that conservation can be approached. Because maybe what you like to do is draw. Maybe you are a cartographer. Maybe you're a budget person, you know, and we're trying to show these kids that there are so many different ways that you can support conservation, that you can become a conservationist.
He's a little special. You really don't get to see animals like this very often in real life. So this is a southern flying squirrel. They don't really fly, but they do glide from tree to tree.
So you can't talk about an animal, or you can't cure an animal if you don't understand that animal. And so that was kind of the point that we were trying to make to these young people is you gotta have a conservation background. You have to know your biology, you have to know your wildlife if you want to help them heal. And we also felt very strongly about doing this program because we were doing it for kids who were in hospitals. And it was very much a message of, hey, if this little flying squirrel can do it, so can you. And you know, it was sort of that underlying message of come on, we can all get better. And so that's the program that we do at the Wildlife Rehab Center. This is a careers, and I'll let you go ahead, yeah, if you could. So these are, and the audio on this isn't really relevant, but this is a Wildland Firefighter. He works for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Again, a wonderful career for young people and a great way to pay for college. And he's showing them how to deploy a fire shelter. And this is, you know, worst case scenario, everything has gone wrong in your wildlife wildfire fighting world, this is what you do. Yeah. So that's the deploying of a fire shelter. And again, an introduction to a potential career and a very different way to engage in conservation. Then we go out to the W.G. Jones State Forest. And we talk about the red-cockaded woodpecker, and we talk about technology again. This is Donna, her name is Donna Work, and she is a biologist, and she's been studying those birds for, I want to say 30 years, and she is incredible. I wish I had the picture, but she has actually pulled together, she has pulled together 6 different ladders. She climbs up one ladder, drops her rope, pulls up another ladder, hooks it up, climbs up that ladder, drops a rope. She's done it 6 ladders high. And then she gets up there and she sticks her hand in the hole. She doesn't. She sticks a little loop in there and she pulls out these little birds, but she doesn't, sometimes there's a flying squirrel in there that comes flying out at her. She doesn't know, and she does. But that's sort of that's the buildup for the kids, the excitement of what's in there. And so we talk about the W.G. Jones State Forest. It's one of the largest urban working forests in the country, and that's just outside of Houston. And it has a red-cockaded woodpecker, and these people that do these fascinating jobs studying these birds and keeping track of them and documenting them. And so they get to see her at work. And I love it that she's not some 17-year-old kid in fire gear. She's climbing up there, she's working hard, and she gets to the top of those trees and they're doing this. And anyway, she's a really, really interesting person. There's a link to the catalog, and so classrooms can register, and then we get piped into their classroom, and then Region 4 records the program, and then they put it in their catalog, and if a teacher would like to then download that program and share it with her students, or his students, then it's not live, but you get that content. And so all of this is TEKS based. All of this, we have worked with Region 4 and said, okay, what do we need to make this qualify? And so they help us work through that to make sure that this is something that teachers actually can use. So that is pine forest red-cockaded woodpeckers. And this, okay, you gotta play this in. Sorry, very partial. Isn't he cute? Atwater Prairie Chicken, of course. One of the most endangered birds in North America, neck and neck with the Condor. Boy, they hit a power line and things change. So, and Harvey wiped out 80% of them. 80% meaning there were 12 left on the landscape. So, obviously the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service cannot bring this bird back without the help of captive breeding. It is functionally extinct. This is a little bird that lives 2 to 3 years. Obviously habitat loss, prairie. Please, folks, volunteer. Keep those workshops great. It's organizations like this that give us all hope. But loss of prairie habitat, and oddly enough, fire ants. They have come to the realization that the fire ants are wiping out the insect population in the prairie, and those chicks are starving. The chicks eat insects, the adults eat seeds, and the chicks are starving because there are not enough insects on the prairie. And so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does this really weird aerial spray of chemicals to get rid of fire ants, but you know what? There are so many of them, it gets gobbled up really quickly, and our success rate for nesting birds goes through the roof. And so that's what we're doing on the refuge, is we're trying to restore prairie, and we're trying to get rid of fire ants. But what's happening elsewhere is the Houston Zoo, Fossil Rim Wildlife Center, and a couple of other facilities are rearing these birds, they're raising these birds in captivity. And so, boy, huge shout out to the Houston Zoo and to Fossil Rim, because they are producing these birds, and they've got some that they've got a facility out with NASA. They've got a partnership with NASA where they have those birds out in pens out there, and they're raising them out there, and then very scientific, very complicated, and I don't even pretend to understand. They raise those birds in captivity, and then they end up releasing them on the Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge. In fact, I believe today they've got some birds out there that the zoo took out, and they've got them in their acclimation pens, because they'll bring them out from the zoo and they'll leave them in some acclimation pens for a couple of weeks, let them get used to the sights and the sounds and all that good stuff, and they'll keep feeding them some insects and slowly withdraw from that, and then they let the birds go. And we do that every year, every season, and again, if we didn't do that, these birds would not be on the landscape. And it drives me crazy because here we have one of the most charismatic little birds in the country, quite frankly. It's not an hour outside of Houston and nobody knows about it. Nobody. There's one organization. There's a Friends of Atwater Prairie Chicken. You know, the Condor, good Lord. You'll get tote bags and caps, and you'll get all kinds of memberships if you donate. There are so many ways to donate to the Condor, but there's one organization that's supporting the Atwater Prairie Chicken. And anyway, so what we do is we take the kids into the NASA breeding facility, and they get to see this little bird dance. And we don't end it with a gloom and doom, you know, oh my God, Hurricane Harvey. We do a little Atwater Prairie Chicken dance challenge. We encourage them to. Yes, I would show you, but that's a little too much. I'm willing to do a lot for that bird, but. So, yeah. So anyway, we tell the story of the Atwater Prairie Chicken and encourage them to create videos and post them online. And just an FYI, Houston Audubon. Oh, you can hear him. Yeah. Okay, so true story. I went out one time. So there is an Atwater Prairie Chicken Festival. They do it once a year. It's in April when the birds are booming. It's the only time you can really see the bird. I went out there one time with the refuge biologist, and we were in a van because we were going to check out the festival setup. And so we're sitting there, and a little bird walks up. And I'm like, oh, he's so cute. And he jumps on the van, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so lucky. Look at me. Oh, I'm the Atwater Whisperer. And he's like, no, he just thinks you're a female. He thinks that the van is a female. He wants to mate with the van. Like, oh, the total prey base. They are not the brightest bird. They are meant to be food on the prairie. This is your drive-through. This is your coyotes. And he said, I swear to God, I watched a coyote one time walk up and just grab one. So, not the brightest intellectually, but certainly in plumage, and adored by a small few, hopefully you all as well now. But that's the Atwater Prairie Chicken and the programming that we do to try to create some awareness, because it's not habitat loss that's going to get this bird, it's lack of awareness. That's what's going to ensure that this bird becomes extinct. Because Houston Zoo can't display this bird. This bird comes out during breeding season and that's it. Otherwise, he's just a little huddled thing trying to hide. He's charismatic for about a month out of the year. It's really hard to get, to display them and make it interesting. So we are really fortunate that we have such dedicated breeders that are helping us. Our numbers were going up. It was working. We finally figured out the fire ant treatment, and it was working, and our numbers were going up. The bird was doing its thing. It was reaching a point where it was, self-maintaining. And then we had the tax day floods, and it wiped out a big portion of them. And then I think, was it 2 years later? I can't remember. Anyway, we just had flood after flood after flood, and they just can't do it. And that's the problem. This bird is found in 2 locations, on the Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge and on private lands in Goliad County. That's it. It's nowhere else. So you get a hurricane, you got some problems. A few years back. Yeah, so the question was, have we considered putting the bird in other locations? And yes, the answer is yes. But you have to have a viable population, and it's, you know what, you'd be surprised, like those acclimation pins, it's like building a house. You know, you put those acclimation pins and it'll literally take 12 people 3 weeks. We've done it with youth crews, and it will take a long time. So it's not just, oh, here, let's go release them over here. And there are a lot of other considerations, but absolutely. So, because its range used to extend from South Texas all the way up into Louisiana. So in the perfect world, anywhere in that range should qualify. Apparently there are stories of the settlers that are just like, let's just move on, they're too loud, let's keep going, because there were so many, and the booming of the Atwaters was so loud. And I can't remember what the distance is, but you can hear them for like 8 miles or something ridiculous on the prairie. So anyway, I would really encourage you, if you get a chance, go out and see these birds, because they really, worst case scenario, captive breeders lose their funding and we get a hurricane and this bird really might not be around. So, yes. Yes, and that's, no, it is not. I think they may have a couple of birds, but it's not what it was. Yeah. Again, this is a bird that lives 2 or 3 years. So that's hard, you got that long to study, learn, and then next thing you know, you got a whole new set. But yes, there was, and there used to be, I want to say there was like 8 captive breeding facilities, and now we're down to really 3. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service used to donate significant funds to those captive breeding facilities, but our budgets go, not necessarily reliable. So anyway, I always turn everything into an Atwater Prairie Chicken presentation when I'm talking to Houstonians. So, and then here we are. This is a video. This is our law enforcement folks who are at work at the airports and the ports, and they are looking for wildlife traffickers, and they're really fascinating. He was talking about opening a box, but he saw these little red claws coming out, and he was like, uh-ohs. And it turned out to be a box full of these red scorpions that were highly coveted by scorpion collectors or something. Go figure. Anyway, so they're really fascinating folks. They have dogs, and they're looking for ivory. They're looking for pangolin scales. Pangolins are actually the most wildlife trafficked critter in the world. So they're looking for elephants, or elephant tusks. This is an ocelot pelt that they're talking about. That's a big deal here in Texas. So these are again, just an introduction to kids. If you're interested in law enforcement, you can do law enforcement for wildlife. So, and it's I was really hoping Jaime would be here and he would be able to see this video, because this is him in the UTMD Anderson Pocket Prairie.
And so we're going to tag a monarch live right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the tag off, just like so. Julia, come right over here. All right.
And we got Julia, a really sweet response from the kids. They were like, what did that feel like? It didn't feel like anything. So, but yeah, so we talk about monarchs, pollinators. We talk about urban habitats and the importance. We are always talking about native plants. Everything we talk about is native plants, native plants. If you don't have the dirt and you don't have the native plants, you don't have the critters. So that's that. And we engage the kids. We're not able to talk to them directly, but what we do is at the beginning of the show, we pull up this slide and we give them a phone number, and then they text their questions to us. And so sometimes the teacher will directly text us the question, and then sometimes they will send us a picture of the questions. And we get some humdingers, let me tell you, some but we also get some of these kids, they know what they're talking about. So it's great fun to see what they come up with. So I don't know if you all are still reading through that, but so yeah. So why do monarchs enjoy the prairies and grasslands better than other habitats? So, and this is just so that you know it's out there. And if you'd like to learn more about it, and if you'd like to find out where the catalog is at the end of it, this is one of the story maps version. So if you want to Google Virtually Wild Texas, you can find it. It's out there. Please, by all means, share it. We'd appreciate it. We want everyone to know about this program. We try very hard to publicize it to schools. They don't have much nature programming, and so we are trying very hard to get the word out about this being available to teachers. I believe it costs $25 per Virtually Wild session, but then they can purchase the video for $8 or something. I'm not sure. So anyway, over the last couple of years, we've done 17 different programs, and we've reached almost 6,000 people, and including 40 classrooms. And moving forward, we are actually really excited. One of the things that happened is we went to one of the hospitals. We went to Children's Memorial, and we said, hey, we're doing this Virtually Wild thing. Do you think you all might be interested? And they said, yes, but the problem is our kids can't participate in it if it's a live program. You know, they can't, doctors are making rounds. It's hard for our kids to consistently be there at that time frame, or any time frame for that matter. Could you just record it and share it with us? And so it has taken it to a whole new level for us. Now we stand there and we do our Virtually Wild, and then when it's over, we pull that natural resource export over, and then we do a completely different interview, and we're capturing video, and we are now shifting to creating these 15-minute videos that are going to air. We know that Texas Children's Hospital wants it, so all of this programming is going to end up going into these videos and is going to go to Texas Children's. We're also working with Children's Memorial. Haven't quite locked that one in. The Children's Assessment Center, don't know if you all are familiar with that organization, but they work with families dealing with sexual abuse, and this is their little safe room. So when they take those children in, and their folks are dealing with law enforcement or all those other scary things, they take their children into this room where they can play and distract themselves, and they've got a big screen up there, and they put our program up. And so whenever we run the program, you know, I'll check with them and I'll say, hey, did you have any kids? And they say, we had 3 kids, but we had 12 staff. So, like, okay, that works. So we're really excited because Virtually Wild is morphing. It's, you know, and all of this is to serve kids that can't access nature. Whether you're sitting in a classroom and your school doesn't have the budget, or they don't have the transportation dollars or whatever, or if you're sitting in a hospital room. And so it just was really poignant. Talking to the Texas Children's folks, you know, I said, you know, how many programs do you need? Like how, you know, if we show one a week, I'm assuming most of your patients are here, what, 3 months maybe at most? And the woman was like, no. She's like, we've had children who've been here a year, and they have no interaction. You know, some of them are in isolation. And she said, so actually for those children, I'm especially interested in Virtually Wild because they can text you, they can engage you, they can actually talk to somebody about something different. So for the general population in the hospital, yes, we're thrilled about the 15-minute videos. But for our kids who are actually really struggling, we're especially interested in Virtually Wild because it lets them interact with somebody. And so, yeah, and we're really excited about it. And now we've just like, oh my gosh, these videos can play everywhere. So we're pretty excited about it. And certainly if you have any suggestions or comments or ideas, we welcome them. Again, we are a partnership-based effort, and we are open to suggestions and ideas. So thank you so much. It was my pleasure.